about a 30-second.
Yeah.
I never know. How long is this? Now it feels super long. I didn't know we were making people wait like this. All right, we'll just go.
Yeah,
This is when I would say, welcome to Healthcare Triage Live, and I would usually do our housekeeping, which I'm not going to do today because you have all done more than enough to support us at this point, and we truly appreciate it. And then we just start in with the questions. So question number one.
Yeah, I have this rash. And
Yeah.
I was wondering what you think might be some easy wins for healthcare in the U.S., either policy-wise or treatments that we could make more effective use of, things like that.
Well, I mean, I think easy wins that we avoid all the time, ironically enough, most of them have to do with public health. So we are woefully underperforming with respect to how much we actually put into public health and what we do. In fact, we just did a Healthcare Triage News, I think it was like last week, on some wins in public health, things we've invested in the last few years that have shown great rewards. Smoking cessation has been a huge win. Adolescent teen pregnancy is an unbelievable win. I mean, the teen pregnancy rate, the teen abortion rate, teens having sex, it's all-time lows. I mean, all time. And those are largely due to, I think, public health. At a larger level, this is where it gets a little more controversial. When you're talking about easy wins, it's either at the policy level, what could we do, or for actual health. I still think that, the things that make the most difference are the non-controversial ones. Things like getting people to be more physically active and eat better diets would be by far the most overall wins, because all of those things have been shown again and again and again, not only to be correlated with just better general health in general, but also to help reduce the risks of big-time disease like cancer, like cardiovascular disease, which is still the #1 killer in the Western world. And so probably putting money into those areas is still the best thing we could be doing. Having said that, we will continue to put money into the things that don't work as well, like drugs and procedures. And not that those things don't work in the individual sense, but that is certainly where we seem to invest our money. The biggest driver of healthcare spending in the United States right now by far is technology. New technology is always where it is. And unfortunately, a lot of times that technology is not well proven. And I've just summarized like half our Healthcare Triage episodes right there. So I've saved you an enormous amount of time. Thank you very much.
So by the time a family member becomes a primary caregiver for someone who has a chronic illness or is aging, they've lost the time and energy and sometimes the financial means to learn how to do that well. How do you think we can better support family caregivers to make their transitions out of the hospital and to make lives more meaningful?
So that's a great question. I assume everyone can hear the questions, so I don't have to repeat them. Okay, great. So part of it is recognizing that we do so much care, we rely so much on people at home to do the caregiving. And we don't finance that in any way. We don't finance the education, we don't finance the time, we don't finance the actual work. If we do the same thing in the hospital, we're willing to pay $1 gazillion for it, but we know that if we move people outside the house, it'd be much more cost effective, and yet we are not willing to spend money in that way. Part of that is philosophical. We seem willing to pay for stuff, but not when it's being delivered at home. So what could we do better? We could invest in that. We could invest in education and be willing to spend money to train people at home to do that. We could be willing to actually cover people's time off of work, or that they have to take off from whatever else they were doing in order to do that. Again, that's been shown in research to be very cost effective, and also to often achieve better outcomes. But we don't do it. So much of the tragedy of healthcare in the United States is that what we know we should be doing, we just won't. Whether that's because of politics or whether that's because of philosophy, those things always seem to come into play. But there's no question that we could do more. Thank you. So if people want to line up, that's fine. That way we won't have like a mad rush every time someone sits down, but go ahead.
Hi, I am Matthew. I am a Boston area healthcare lawyer with a background in public health.
Cool.
And before November, I did retail patient advocacy, Medicare, Medicaid planning, PA appeals, that sort of thing. Since November, things have changed.
Right.
And now it's wholesale advocacy, forming a 501c4 for the first time in my life called Healthcare Rights Coalition with other patients. And the thing I want to ask you about is, you are really, I assume the three of you, more of you perhaps, really good at taking really complex healthcare policy ideas and presenting them
that's all I really
shortly.
Right.
So that you're in your audience's attention span.
Yep.
But also not really losing salient details.
Well, now you're just being nice to us, but I appreciate it.
It's true.
Thank you.
How do you do it?
So, I think part of it is that my attention span's not great. I probably have incredibly high functioning ADHD in some way, and part of the ways that I compensate is by trying to do things in small bites. Part of it too is that I do this a lot. So I do, besides doing sort of this, I write pretty regularly for a number of different outlets, and I do radio sort of every week. And so doing those kinds of things forces me time and time again to learn how to do this in short bites. I also, in 2009, 2010, that's when I sort of committed to writing a blog. And that was how this all got started. It was like, I basically said 2 times a day I'm going to write, 1-2 times a day I'm going to write 600, 800 words every day on some important topic till I get good at it. And it took years. But practice, and partially that, doing that. And then it's like, I have another job, which I don't talk about in healthcare triage much. But, part of what I do in my training is to try to take research, understand it, and then get others to understand it. And a lot of that is trying to get other physicians to understand, but physicians are people. Trying to get them to understand it is the same thing as trying to get the public to understand it. So that's a long-winded answer to say I practice. I think it's that. And plus it helps. It's like, when I came into this, I remember John was like 4 minutes max, that's all you get. And I was like, oh, we're gonna go 6. Because I don't think I can squeeze it down to 4. But we aim for 6 minutes or less in healthcare triage episodes and like 4 minutes or less for news. And so that's our goal.
When you started, did you workshop your scripts beforehand or just go with it?
I don't think I did. No, amazing. No, I would write them. I send them to these guys and now Meredith, and then sometimes I actually don't. This is where I don't even know how much you edit them.
We don't make that many changes.
Okay, so then no, they just go, and then there's a teleprompter, and boom, we're off to the races.
So be more like you.
Oh, it's not. I did practice. I say practice.
Hi. So I loved when you guys did a few different videos on healthcare systems around the world.
Yeah.
That was a great series. And so I was wondering, with all the discussion of changes and repeal and replace with Obamacare, what you guys thought would be the best possible system for America?
Oh, it's I get this question so often, and the problem is it sort of no, it's not even that. It's just it sort of changes. So if your flat out answer is what do I think is the best healthcare system, period. I think more often than not, I answer France. I think France does a phenomenal job, and if you watch the video, you heard me say why, of providing very comprehensive coverage for everyone, and then a private market for the bells and whistles on top of that the vast majority of people buy into, usually through their job. Their breadth of what they consider covered care is enormous, way more than we would consider. The knock against France is that it's expensive. Of course, that's compared to every other country in the world but the United States, which is just insane. So I'm willing to accept that high cost for that. However, the systems that I think we have the best shot at getting here would be more of a Switzerland. So Switzerland, for those of you that haven't watched the videos, and you should, is more of a let's wipe out Medicare and Medicaid, which would please conservatives, and then let's make basically the exchanges writ large birth to death. Everybody has to buy insurance. Most people buy it from nonprofits because every company has to sell a nonprofit product. If you want, you can also buy a for-profit insurance product, which is going to be more comprehensive. I'll get you a nicer room, more bells and whistles. But most people choose the nonprofit. And most of them choose it even in more of a managed care setting, which is cheaper. They have high out-of-pocket costs. And that's the downside, but that's, if I'm saying what can we get as a compromise here, I think that's your most likely bet. It's not terribly different than Wyden Bennett was back in the day when we had sort of comprehensive discussions about what might be bipartisan healthcare reform before the world went on fire. So that is it. I also think, I think that there's a lot to learn from most of those countries, which is why we tried to do that series. And if we were going to build something again, we could pick and choose amongst what we think is the best of all of them. Thank you.
Hi, so among all the different news that's been going on in politics lately, it's kind of hard to keep up with what's going on as far as healthcare policy and the repeal and replace of the Affordable Care Act. Yep. And I just wanted to ask, what sort of do you see as the trajectory of healthcare in the U.S. going, which direction that's going to go, and how that is going to look for people around the age like 18 to 26.
Okay.
You know, on the daily level.
So ironically enough, if you manage to always stay 18 to 26, I think things will look great. Because one of the few unbelievably popular, unequivocal wins of the Affordable Care Act was getting everybody up to age 26 to be included in a family plan. That is unrepealable, even through reconciliation, because that has nothing to do with the budget. It is going to stick around, I think. If you ask me what are the provisions that are almost the most safe, that would be one of them. And it's not terribly high cost, and it manages to get people covered. Not only that, but it probably is one of the few instances where it's actually led to the opposite of what we call crowd out, because it's important to remember that about 1/3 of all births in the United States are on Medicaid. And we actually published a paper, this is one of the few times I'll talk about my research, we published a paper in the New England Journal of Medicine showing that that provision moved people from Medicaid to private insurance, which so rarely happens with any kinds of legislation like that. So that was a win that everybody loves, even conservatives. Okay, but if you ask me what's going to happen with the Affordable Care Act, you'll record this today and I could have a different answer for you next week. But the truth of the matter is that I'm becoming more and more confident that we're not going to see the major repeal and replace that everybody panicked might actually happen. The Republicans are not as well organized as they would have hoped that they would be in getting this done at this point. They have to have 52 votes in the Senate to sort of get a lot of this done, and people are peeling off. There's a huge amount of disagreement, and we did an episode on this that you could go watch, on some of the real aspects that are important to doing any kind of replacement plan. Those include how much should subsidies be? Should they be age-based or should they be wealth-based? What do we do with the Medicaid expansion? What is actually comprehensive coverage? Should there be a guaranteed issue? In other words, should people be able to buy insurance no matter what? And should there be community ratings, or whether that should be continuous coverage? And I know I'm throwing out a lot of jargon here, but there's no agreement. And without that kind of agreement, it's very hard to move forward. There's also trying to pay for this. It's going to be incredibly difficult, especially if they want to repeal all of the taxes, which most people who are for repeal do. So I'm becoming less and less convinced that there will be wide-scale repeal and replace. That does not mean that the Trump administration cannot make significant changes to it. The Secretary of Health and Human Services has huge, wide latitude with making some changes to the healthcare system, including what is considered a defined benefit. So birth control could be immediately stripped out of the Affordable Care Act with no involvement from Congress whatsoever, as could many other aspects. And some of the things like the lawsuits winding their way up through the pathway, trying to fight the cost-sharing subsidies, could easily be dropped by the Trump administration or changed in some way, and that could have major ramifications for how many insurance companies stayed in the exchanges. So changes can happen, but I don't think that they'll be as huge as many people feared, which is the short answer. But again, I have no doubt we're going to be covering this again and again and again and again in the next few months to years. These are exciting times for healthcare triage. So I would encourage you to keep watching because a lot of stuff's obviously happening.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Kind of continuing on an Obamacare theme here. We're not quite sure what's going to happen with repeal and replace, right? So one of the things that I think is really plausible is the mandate. It's very unpopular, the tax penalty. So that might get axed. So my question is, are there any GOP proposals that evidence shows could plausibly actually bring down premiums if you get rid of the mandate and tax penalty and not get rid of the pre-existing additions?
So we should all be understand that the mandate is the mechanism by which we get healthy people to try to buy health insurance. Because of course, if healthy people don't buy health insurance, then only sick people buy insurance. It becomes even more expensive. More healthy people will leave. It's what we get the death spiral. The whole thing breaks. There are other ways to do that kind of incentive without doing a mandate. That is what open enrollment is about. We could change the mechanism by which that works. There are ways to instead penalize people when they want to actually buy insurance if they haven't bought it already. So you can get rid of a mandate and still fix that aspect of it. However, none of those are very popular. And so it's very unlikely to happen. The trick And where the Republicans, I think, are in a bind right now is that at the same time they're decrying the high out-of-pocket costs of Americans for health care and how much insurance costs, almost all of their plans for replacement require more out-of-pocket costs, and sometimes even, the premiums would probably go down, but the out-of-pocket costs would go way up because it has been a conservative tenet of healthcare reform for decades that we don't have enough skin in the game, that people need to be exposed to high out-of-pocket costs. That's what will prevent them from wasting money, and so that's where we need to go. But they've run campaigns on it. Deductibles are too high, so they can't square that circle. The only way to bring down both is to spend more money, which you could do. I mean, Hillary Clinton had a plan. I know we did an episode. I always say this during the episodes too, and they always yell at me. It's like I always go, we had an episode on this. But yes, you should go. So Hillary Clinton had plans for reducing high deductibles, but it could cost money. I mean, it cost a ton of money. It was $100 billion a year, which we could do. So I think the key thing to note in all Republican plans that come out is how much money are they willing to spend. If you're willing to spend $1 trillion over a decade, you might actually make a dent in people's healthcare spending. If you try to reduce that number by, go any lower, then you're gonna actually have to see subsidies go down, which means your premiums will go up, or you're gonna have to see higher out-of-pocket costs. There's just no other way to do it. There's no magic. It's all trade-offs. That's the breaks.
Has any proposal matched this?
No. I mean, there's no proposal. That's the thing. Is really, honestly, it's other than a better way, which is still incredibly vague, and other than Tom Price's plan, which has that's not happening, and Cassidy Collins, which is not. We did an episode on Cassidy Collins, but Cassidy Collins, these things are all compromised. But no, there's no support, and anytime they come close, the CBO is going to finally put numbers on that thing, and everyone's going to freak out. So. If there are actual plans and they get scored by the CBO, I promise you we will cover them and talk about the pros and cons, but I think it's very unlikely that's going to happen in the near future.
Thank you.
I'm going to try to talk faster because we got to...
We're doing an episode on Cassidy Collins.
Oh, I
from
apologize.
Monday.
Watch the episode on Cassidy
shot.
Collins. Yes, we already shot it. That's when I get confused because we have things in the bank, but we got to get them up.
Hi, so my question is completely unrelated to
Sure.
healthcare. In one of your episodes, you talked about the Clone Wars, and you spoiled it. Thank you.
Oh, how can you spoil the Clone Wars?
Because I hadn't gotten to that part yet.
Statute of
I
limitations.
sincerely apologize for having spoiled the Clone. It did not even occur to me that I would be doing that. I apologize.
Is it okay if we talk about the end of Casablanca?
That's fine. So my question is, have you read the Ahsoka book, and what did you think of it?
I have not read the Ahsoka book. I got to be honest, which is shocking to me. But which one? Which one are we talking about?
It was the newest one. It's just called Ahsoka.
I will go read that. I promise. But I've not
should.
read it.
It's
I will
awesome.
do that. I will do that. Thank you.
My wife just began a career in nursing, and she couldn't be here today, but she wanted me to ask you for your advice in what direction you think would be the most advantageous for her to sort of invest her time, like travel nursing, emergency nursing, robotics, what would be...
What does she want to... That's such a personal question, so I wish she was here so I could be well, what are you interested in? What makes you happy?
She'd like to make lots of money. I'd like to...
Travel nursing.
Well, that's on the table.
Yeah, that'll work too. Any nurse proceduralist will also make you a lot of money. Nurse practitioners do pretty well.
Well, because she's thinking about getting a master's
that's
degree or
right.
becoming an NP, and she was wondering what direction travel nursing had come up, but she heard there was no money in travel nursing.
Well, that's the thing is if you're willing to go, every day there's job postings. So we need someone in locum tenens to do short-term work, and they will pay through the nose because they're so desperate. So, but unfortunately, that's not very conducive to home family life.
Alaska.
If you're willing to move too, that's always the case. That's how capitalism works. If you're willing to move to a place that is not as... I live in Indiana, folks. If you're willing to move to a place that's not as desirable to some, then sometimes the rewards can be greater.
And she was specifically hoping to hear something about robotics. Is that the wave of the future?
So maybe, but this is where I would actually caution you is a lot of the stuff that seems sort of super cool and techie is the kind of stuff that they're making money now, but you never know when the crash is going to come. And so robotics may be hot right now, but when we have to finally cut stuff, it's the super expensive stuff that we haven't proven works that's going to go first. So that's where I'd be I don't know.
So I should tell her travel? nursing?
Tell her what makes her happy. I mean, whatever, you have to make that like sort of graph about how much money and what makes you happy and pick that point that's, getting you the most.
Thank you.
Sure.
Say this, you're my hero.
Oh,
Start with
no, you're going to watch me
that.
melt under the
And
table, but thank you.
I'm a little line flower, and we've had a couple of my questions, and you retweeted me yesterday. I almost died.
No.
So my mom has decided recently that she eats all organic food, but she can't figure out what she's putting on her face. So she switched to no chemicals makeup.
Mm-hmm.
And she's
She knows everything's a chemical, right?
I'm trying to tell her. I found the chemical name for rose water, and I threw that at her. And
Just to ask her how much she likes dihydrogen oxide or something like that.
She claims to be worried about a thyroid issue that could be a possibility if you wear a face full of makeup, chemicals all day for 10 years. Anything?
No. So this is where, this is like you're getting your first real eye roll here. No, because I want to even just spend time talking about the organic, but we're just going to let that one go. So no, they're just, everything's a chemical. Now granted, if we're talking about the humane treatment of animals and the testing and everything else, then I'm totally on board. But if we're just talking about here's 2 piles of stuff, what are you going to put on your face? Unless the stuff is toxic and known to be toxic, then it really doesn't make too much of a difference either way.
And the sunscreen and the 80% of everything you put on gets absorbed, panic. Just making sure.
Yeah, the sun is dangerous in high amounts. Sunscreen unequivocally is a good thing when people use it the right way. The fears about what's getting absorbed in cancer just are not well proven at all. And the stuff is used so ubiquitously. It's the kind of thing we would know. That's where we have to get, when we talk about things like cell phones and these dangers that are so, if it was truly increasing the cancer rate, we'd see it on a population level. This wouldn't be, we'd have to go to a tiny town and do a case control study to figure it out. It'd be massive. That's not happening. The thyroid concerns, everything, these things sort of crop up in groups, but there's just nothing proven at all. So I would not be worried about that. But I find that it's like some people are just inclined to worry, and every time I try to knock down one thing, another will just come up to take its place. It's like a hydra, so I don't know. It's skin cream. It probably isn't going to make that much of a difference either way. It's probably fine. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi.
Nice to meet you. You spoke at some point previously, I think in a live show, about the ambiguity or mystery around chronic Lyme disease diagnosis. Mm-hmm. And I have kind of a 2-part question about it. The first is there any evidence suggesting what is actually going on with these patients? Mm-hmm. And in this ambiguity, what should insurers do with these patients?
So it's just a complicated thing because unfortunately it's, chronic Lyme disease is just not as well studied and not as well put together as we'd like. So the amount of evidence that we have to sort of describe it and say this is exactly what it looks like is scant. Secondly, it's incredibly varied. So, tons of things get lumped into it, some of which probably are real and some of which probably are not. So we just don't have the information. Now the good news is it's sort of irrelevant to insurers because most insurance is just built up around you get care. They're not very good, as much as you might think, about saying no to individual things about what's the cause. If you have symptoms, they will treat symptoms. Most insurance will. Mm-hmm. And so it's somewhat irrelevant when it comes to payers. They're going to cover the symptoms, and a lot of it is still symptomatic care. But that's a specific thing that I'd say write me, and I'll look, try to get you some, specific information on Lyme. But yeah, that's about what we've got.
We'll do that.
Okay. You guys do not have to applaud after every single one.
It's not for you, it's for them.
Well, then if it's for them, applaud after every single one. Absolutely.
So, I'm absolutely delighted to be here, and I really appreciate you guys coming
Thank you.
over. And, so I have a med school interview on Monday,
mm-hmm.
and thank you. And, I'm just wondering what advice you have for me going into the field and...
This is the advice that I get a lot, the question I get a lot, and I give the same answer, and unfortunately it doesn't please. I would say for the next 4 years, concentrate incredibly hard on being a medical student. And then for the years after that, concentrate incredibly hard on being a resident. And then you get to talk about what you want to do with your life. That's like what's scary. It's like I was in the 25th grade when I got my first job. And I figured out what I actually wanted to do, 5 years? I don't know. It's so it's just that there's so much that you have to do to get to the end of the whole medical training that I'd say focus on that. There'll be plenty of time to do other stuff.
Okay. And anything to keep in mind in terms of how the field's changing when you're going through it, or just keep focusing?
I'd say just keep focusing. A lot of that, especially because it depends where you wind up. Like I'm a doctor, but my real job is not being a doctor. It's a tiny, tiny part of my job. And so, the focus, what I was taught in medical school was not the stuff that I use every day, amazingly enough. And so, but I couldn't predict this. I didn't even know this existed before, a certain point in my life. And when I do this, I'm not even talking about healthcare triage. It's like what I do every day. It's just not what I was learning in medical school. But most people coming out of medical school want to be doctors, which is great. And so they should focus on being doctors.
Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hi, Dr. Carroll. So we're moving more towards evidence-based.
You think so?
In
Glad
medicine,
you think
we're
so.
trying to, that's the emphasis, at least that's what they're
That's what
teaching
we're
us,
trying to do,
right?
yeah.
So, but at the same time, we're in this climate where even basic facts seem to be up for debate. And so I'm wondering, is there a way, or do you have any inkling as to how you can encourage people to look more at data instead of just like the knee-jerk, I am in this tribe?
I think you just made a commercial for healthcare triage. I mean, it's just my answer is this. Like this, my writing,
So just
speaking.
email a link to the channel.
Well, I mean, it's like, and I think other activities like it. There are people out there trying very hard. There are scientists out there who make careers out of trying to talk about science and its flaws and what needs to get better. There are writers who do that. There are people making videos who do that. I think there are causes. When people ask me directly, what do I think people should do? I'm like, it's a flippant answer, but I say like this, because it's like, this is what I know how to do. This is my answer to that question. Like we try to, as widely as possible and through all the means of communication that I have, try to influence people to care about those things that you said more than their tribal answers, and just to recognize that there are many things in the world we can have debates about, but science and studies are not one of them. Like we can look at it, we can discuss, and you can interpret results, but we can know things. That's okay, and we can continue to refine that knowledge, but it is possible. So, healthcare triage.
Have you personally had any inroads in the Indianapolis legislature?
Oh God, no. No, I would say so. Maybe. I mean, it's like, to be honest with you, I try very hard not to be an advocate as much as I try to be standing and speaking. So I have testified only once, in front of the Indiana legislature. That was for the Medicaid expansion, and it was only because a couple of groups asked me to. And I kid you not, when I gave the testimony, there were 4 old people sitting over here not paying attention to what I was saying. And then the second I was done, they asked me a question that was completely stupid and irrelevant, and I just stared for a minute, and then I was like, really? And but I realized that guy wasn't even listening to the answer. So I don't know. On the other hand, we got a Medicaid expansion, so who knows? So I don't think it was me, but thank you. Oh, see? Okay, I just got told again not to hit the table. This is one thing I do all of the time.
Classic Dr. Care.
Yeah, it's sorry.
Pretty good segue, I guess. So I was wondering if you have advice on communicating in terms of medicine and in terms of public health and making that distinction, right? You do it all the time. Being a public health student, people are like, should I take this drug? And I'm like, you should have gotten a flu shot, right?
Right.
So I guess what are your strategies to make that distinction and communication around that, both, I guess, educational and effective for all the parties involved?
So, I mean, I just think of it all as health. I don't make a necessary distinction between what I say is a treatment and what I say is prevention. Or what do I say is, that's part of what it is. It's bizarre to me, but it's doctors can talk about diet. Doctors can talk about physical activity. Doctors can talk about not smoking. There's tons of things that we do all of the time that isn't necessarily acute treatment. And that's great. That's what we should be doing. So I try hard not to make a distinction between those things and sort of address them all in the same way.
Cool.
Thank you.
As not a member of the medical community, but somebody who cares about people being healthy.
Sure.
What can non-medical professionals do to improve health outcomes, just the general healthiness of people, advocacy, donating, volunteering? What's
what's the best move to be helpful even if you're not professionally involved?
Vote. I mean, that's a it's a flippant answer, but it's people ask me, that is the best thing you can do. So much of this is driven by, we got to own, it's 17% of the economy. It's an enormous outlay by the government. 2/3 of healthcare spending in the United States, of that 17%, is public spending. It's a massive sink of what we are spending as a country. So we should care, and we should vote, and we should have that money put to better use. Okay. Having said that, certainly there are many, many other things people can do. I think advocacy is great. It's never been my thing. It's just sort of like everyone has theirs. Like I'm just not, I'm not an advocate because I find that I'm much more grounded in the science and the research. And so when my research says that the thing that I care about is wrong, I will change my mind. And advocates don't do that as often, which is part of what makes them advocates, and that's totally fine, but that's great. Education is super important. Campaigns, all this stuff works. We are changing the dialogue and the way things are getting done. I find it interesting to watch how Planned Parenthood, the tide just swings one way or the other based upon, what's going on in the world and how their campaigns are going and who's attacking and who's defending, and it's not my skill set. I sort of sit there and I'm like, I don't even know what muscle to flex to make all of that work. But there are certainly so many different ways that people can get involved and try to change things. And you certainly don't have to be in the medical field to care about health. There's so many other even allied fields that I think are caring about health. And I think in general, even from an educational standpoint, their health. Now I will tell you that my kid's health teacher is a moron. And I've never met the person, but the stuff that my kids come home telling me, I'm like, no! But it's, but I'm thrilled that at least they're trying to do education. So it's, A for effort, D for content. But that doesn't mean that can't be very well done, and that there are not other ways for people to get involved. Thank you.
My name's Florence. First, I just wanted to thank you for doing what you do. I've been watching you since the beginning, and I'm a medical student now. And
great!
And and I'm really interested in getting involved in kind of what you do, kind of advocating and spreading just kind of education about science and medicine. And one of my concerns is you hear about this all the time, especially with physicians getting involved in government, is that you're leaving, you're selling out in some ways, and that you're not, you're a doctor, you should be taking care of your patients. And how, because I want to be a physician and also, do stuff outside of taking care of patients, how can I balance that without making me feel I'm not?
Who says they're a sellout? That's the first thing I'd say, because it's lots of people say nasty things about me all the time. My God, CNN.com commenters are the worst human beings on earth. And I don't write for them anymore, but they were the worst. But it's after a while, you're I care what the people I respect and care about think of me. I don't care as much about what everyone thinks of me. So that's my flippant answer. So the more thorough answer is also, there is no obligation that you are required to do. Wow, this is just like the show. Yeah. This is just like the show. If they don't kick the camera every 15 minutes, it goes black. So that was just like it. That's awesome. It's just like being there. Anyway,
very authentic experience.
Yeah. So you're under no obligation to be any kind of doctor or owe any kind of debt or anything else. I went to medical school, I went to college, and I did fellowship training. And, what I do is not necessarily doctoring every day, but I feel like I'm making a valuable contribution through my research, through my teaching, and the other things that I do. And that's my life, and I love it, and it feels good, and that's fine. So I wouldn't worry so much what other people think in terms of if you feel like you're doing a good job and making a difference in the world, that's at the end of the day what really matters. So I would, but I will give you the same advice that I gave someone a few minutes ago. It's you're a medical student. I would encourage you very strongly to be a medical student. Your goal at this point is to learn everything that you can and then move on to the next stage, which is likely residency and then perhaps fellowship. And it's a long road ahead, and it's hard and it's time consuming. So, and as we've done, it can be very, very grinding, and people, can get, lost, depressed, burned out. So I encourage you to take care of yourself and to focus on that stuff now. all of this stuff will still be waiting when you are done. But if you want to do things on the side, do them. Like I would never tell someone not to do something that makes them happy or that they're passionate about.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Mark. I got my degree in biostatistics 20 years ago.
Great.
And I did not think that I would be having this discussion 20 years later.
Yeah.
But the early progress of assisted suicide, and also given the baby boomers and the demographics of that, what do you think is the future of assisted suicide?
So I
in
think
this
that's
country?
much more political than anything else. I think that all given, if everything was left equal, I think you would see more and more of it. But I think I might have I can't remember if I've talked about this on a live episode or just in general. This is one of those issues where I almost wish we could just remove physicians from it entirely. Because there are doctors who feel quite strongly about whether it is a good or bad thing. And at the end of the day, this is now Aaron Carroll speaking without evidence, but I think it's a personal decision that is not up to the doctor's philosophy or politics. And so the fact that we force people to move to different states seems odd. The fact that we force people to get sort of medical opinions is sort of odd. The whole thing is just tied up in too many people involved in politics that gets in the way of what some doctors feel quite passionately is either an oath that they have taken or something about that their job is to prolong life. That is just how some doctors feel. And so I think you'll likely see it becoming more and more common. That's less because of the baby boomers, I think, and less because of everything else. Then I just think many, many, many people believe that it is their right when things become unbearable because of illness to end things, especially if they're in horrific pain and there is no hope. That is a very personal decision against which I have very hard times commenting about it. It's not me. And I try very hard not to make those kinds of decisions about other people. So I think it'll probably broaden. But I think you may see it become less tied to medicine. There you go.
So number of states passing in the next 20 years?
Oh, God, I have no idea. Literally no idea. And plus, that's one of those questions, it's like, I think it will change based on what's happening politically. It's the same kind of thing where it's like, what became known as death panels, the idea that we should have, the ability to communicate and consult with patients over end-of-life decisions was the most uncontroversial thing in the world before 2009, and now is death panels. So if politics stays sane, yes, we'll have many more states do this. If things go off the rails, and they seem to be, I have no idea. Yeah. Hi.
So certainly I think we've been seeing prescription drug prices across the country have risen dramatically, and there are groups run by big corporations like the makers of EpiPen have dramatically raised the prices. So what steps can we take policy-wise to prevent that?
Well, we could just make them stop, but that's I think you're going to see more and more that they're going to, I think the things that are low-hanging fruit that they may do are to actually start saying, if there are these long-term drugs that have been out forever, that we're not going to let them raise prices like they have been. There'll be some sort of review that has to happen before they'll do that. I think another thing they could do quite easily is to open the market and make FDA screening of widely used generics worldwide, like things like EpiPens. There are other companies that exist, they just don't work in the United States. And to get into the United States, there's a pretty high bar. I'm all for a high bar for many drugs, but for when it's long-standing drugs we've had forever, they could lower the bar for that. So those are some small steps, or they could allow for drug importation when drug companies do that. All of those would be reasonable fixes. Having said that, it's politics, man. It's just, I just don't know. I don't know if they will allow any of that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, so I'll bet a lot of folks, I had the experience last year, I turned 30 and my body just started breaking down and letting me know
Okay, I'm gonna interrupt you for 2 seconds. I scratched myself on a pool in December and it's still not healed. And
What's up with that?
I was talking yesterday to a friend, I'm freaking out. I'm like, the body's not healing anymore. I'm freaking out about this.
So I'm taking care of myself and I'm getting to the gym, I'm taking care of my mental health and I want to start working on my diet. But the information out there is just all over the place. I don't even know how to get a good baseline. And I'm sure you did an episode, sorry, life got in the way, I haven't checked it out yet.
I know.
But then once I get that baseline right, I want to start figuring out what's the diet that works for me and I don't even know where to go from there.
Right. So, okay, look, it's the basics are pretty simple. It's you want to eat a diet which is going to be healthy for you. it's so broad. I mean, it's like there's no one answer there. It's whatever seems to work for you, where it's like you're maintaining what you believe to be a healthy weight, and you feel like you're not getting into any kind of metabolic syndrome or having any problems. For physical activity, 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, moderate physical activity, brisk walking. You pull that off, that's long-term all you're gonna need. The problem is people being super sedentary. Almost always, when I get these kinds of questions, it's people who are already doing more than enough. Because it's like panicking, like I'm at the gym 5 days a week, but I'm like, yeah, you've won. Stop, like you're doing great, like it's over. The problem is with people who can't make that kind of activation energy. It's like the bar's low. You know, when we talk about physical activity, it's unbelievably low. So worry about these things, you know, work on them, but I would not get consumed with them. You know, food should not be something that everybody is panicked about. It's not, like diet is not something we should all demonize and go crazy about. There's so many ways to eat healthily. We have to start focusing on that it's not that difficult and that you can do it, as opposed to being like, no, 3 people do it right, and unless you're running a triathlon, you've failed. That's just not the case. So, you know, and there are other episodes on this too. So I would say
and a nice flashy poster.
Yeah, we happen to have the recommendations for eating and a poster that you can download for free at the it's at Facebook. Yeah,
you'll have to search now. It's like a year old,
but it was there.
I got those skills.
But yeah, it's not as hard as people make it out to be. And I think, you know, if you just, you know, it's behavioral change. You got to keep at it. You got to keep at it. But if you focus on the low hanging fruit and do it again and again and again, it will become part of your life.
Thanks.
Thank you. Hi.
So I'm a first-year PhD student in biology.
Great.
And one of the things that I've kind of been not really struggling with, but just kind of curious about is, you know, you're applying for funding through research through the NSF, the NIH.
Yep.
And one of the things they want to see is that, you know, it's going to be able to be applied someday and
Yep.
actually help patients. But if you do find something through this publicly funded research, you know, it's normally someone forms a company, they commercialize it, they sell it at a profit.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that there's a better way to do this?
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, you control your stuff. So it's like the only way that stuff gets taken over by companies is when people sell it. So yeah, they do, but it's like, but that's almost always an individual decision. The second is that not all medical advances, in fact, I think a ton of medical advances don't have that application. Now, if you're, you said biology? Mm-hmm. So yeah, clearly in biology, it's going to be probably more focused on something which may be patentable, marketable, things like that. Is there a better way? Yeah, I mean, you know, you'll have control of your research someday. If you make a groundbreaking discovery, there will come a time when you and your partners and your institution will face a decision about, do we take that monstrous pile of money and give it away, or do we find another more equitable way to do it? And some people choose the latter. Not a ton, but some people do. And so, yes, those choices will be before you, and you will make them then. And I will not demonize you either way for when that occurs, because that is part of the system in which we work and part of why it gets the innovation that it does. But there are other ways, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And I'm just going to start moving faster because I want to get to everyone's questions, and I know we're running out of time.
You mentioned that teen pregnancy was one of the wins that we
Mm-hmm.
had in policy, but I've been frustrated that the Colorado experiment on subsidized contraception in the form of LARCs and IUDs hasn't caught on, and it doesn't. We seem to be almost working opposite of that. It seems to be more at risk. Contraception in general seems to be more at risk when that experiment showed, you know, savings and
Right.
unwanted pregnancy and abortion. All is there a way to uncouple that from controversy?
I would actually say that I don't think it's as negative as you think. That you have seen an uptick, a significant uptick in the use of LARC in the United States. I think that message has gotten through. Melinda Gates just sunk a oh my God, see, I almost cursed there. There was close. It was like, oh, screw it. She just sunk a shit ton of money into like contraception, and specifically like this kind of stuff, reversible contraception. And it's going to take that kind of investment because the government's not going to do it. So that's a win. Like, I would say that's an unequivocal win. And I think that the fact that, you know, right now LARC is covered widely by the Affordable Care Act. I don't think that's going away in the immediate future. I think we're seeing an increased rise in that, and those are all good things. This is, again, not just a win. We're seeing the lowest ever. That's awesome. I would not be so pessimistic about the future. Thank you. Hi.
So I'm a neuroscience student,
Mhm.
and the more I learn about the field of psychology, both with regards to like medical knowledge and like public awareness, and especially in communities of color, like the more it scares me. Like it's just like people, first of all, don't understand mental illness, and
Right.
like doctors don't really understand how to diagnose different. Like there's
Yep.
just a lot of confusion. So my question to you is like, what changes do you see like in the future that could like better the field?
So again, this is one of those where it's like, while I understand that when you're in school, like you see the bad side and the pessimism, but this is another one where I think the arc is actually going in the right direction. We certainly see more open discussion and therapy towards mental illness than we did before. Coverage is better than it was before. Awareness is better than it was before. The ability to sort of get in and the methods used are better than before. I think this is moving in the right direction. How do we make it better? We openly talk about it. We've done episodes on that, and this is one where I'm not being facetious about it. But it's like I openly talk about the fact that I was massively depressed as a resident, and I was very lucky that it got recognized. Depression and anxiety and suicide are enormous problems in the medical community, and I advocate for those quite strongly in my own local institution and more widely. But we have to keep talking about it, and we have to bring it out of the closet in the sense that it's like, it's not something to be ashamed of. I'm not ashamed of my ulcerative colitis. I'm not ashamed that I was depressed. Those are just two different things. What are you gonna do? I do what I need to do. I go to therapy. I take my medicine. Oh, look at that. I go to therapy. I take my medicines, and then you just keep fighting. So I'd encourage you just to keep advocating and talking about it, and I think things will continue to get better.
Hi, so I'm thinking about going into like some sort of health-related field, either like medicine or public health. And so obviously there's a ton of different like components, like grassroots work and policy and education, primary care, that are all like crucial for good health outcomes. But what would you say is like the most effective way to enact change to benefit health?
This is, again, now you're outside of my box. I don't know. This is what I know. Like I like know how to do this, and then I hope other people take that information and change the world and advocate with it. So I don't know. But if you're asking me what you should do, I'll give the same answer I've been given all day. It's like whatever makes you happy that you think is gonna win those Venn diagrams of what you enjoy and what you think is good and what will make you happy and what will give you the living and the lifestyle you want. When those overlap, that's what you do. And you don't have to pick it now. Like I've changed. What I did 3 years ago is not what I do now. And if you ask me what I'm gonna be doing 5 years from now, I have no idea. If you want to actively work to make change and change the world, you will likely change what you do many times.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi. So, two things. First, your like openness about your mental health problems has actually been really helpful for me.
Oh,
like,
well,
coming
I'm glad.
to terms with it. But also, so I suffer from like anxiety stuff, and my mom has been slow going on advocating on like any treatment that isn't, oh, you just should take like all these vitamin things and sleep more. Is there
Right.
any validity to the vitamin
No.
weirdest? Okay, good.
It's an easy lightning round answer. No. No supplements, no vitamins, nothing will make any of a difference. But this is where I'll say, like, do you have a doctor?
Yeah.
Talk to your doctor. Yeah. Don't get treatment from your mom.
I wasn't planning on it.
Okay, good. Thank you.
I'm a medical laboratory scientist, and I would like to know how clinicians and the laboratory can better integrate their communication, because it is terrible.
Yeah.
And we are so critical.
You want a
for
Nobel Prize?
helping out.
That's an area. Oh God! It's like, to be honest, I mean, I've spent my like research career, so much of it is like clinical decision support, trying to get doctors to practice in ways that are more efficient. And I've been doing this for 14 years, and it is glacial work. It is just, and we've spent gazillions of NIH dollars trying to improve this, and we can make improvements, but then you realize that they're so localized. The system is so broken and so complex. I wish I had an easy answer for you, but you've just listed one of the untold number of problems that no one thinks about because they're so fixated on the drug and the device and the procedure.
I had a doctor yell at me because a full urine culture was not available in 1 hour.
Well, that, I don't even know what to say. Well, it is if you only care what grows in an hour, but it's like, can you speed up time? I don't know. So that's ridiculous. Thank you very much.
Okay, I have a quick taboo question.
Okay.
I have a friend.
No.
And we're both scientists. And we're both very hard. Well, we're very hard on it. Anyway, quick question. Assuming that our calorie intake is the same, is drinking Coca-Cola worse, like scientifically proven worse than drinking water?
How much Coca-Cola?
The same amount, like instead of water drinking.
Like how many Coca-Colas you drink in a day?
I don't know, theoretically speaking.
Well, here's the thing. No, but this is what I'm actually going to get at. It's like if you tell me like you drink a Coke, okay. Like if you're fit and your diet is okay, I'm not going to lose my mind. It's like if your weight and your health and your labs and everything else is going okay, I don't mess with people like that. But it's like, but if you tell me you're drinking like 8 Coca-Colas a day, I'm going to say like that's an enormous amount of added sugar in your diet, and that much added sugar is not good for you. And so that's the thing that I would care about. It's less that it's the Coke. I don't care about the soda so much as I do like how much added sugar are you getting in a day. That's one of the things I would quit.
So I could not substitute water for Coke?
I would say, well, no, you can always substitute water for Coke. I would not be living solely on Coca-Cola. That's a lot of added sugar, a lot.
Okay, thank you.
It is 12:30, which we're supposed to end, but the next thing's at 1. Is there anyone in here who would kick us out if we did these last 4 questions?
Perfect. Awesome. Let's go.
So it seems like a lot of incorrect beliefs about health and wellness hinge on this idea that basically the sky is falling, that our health is getting worse and worse and worse. And you do a wonderful job of going, actually, that's an outcome that's getting better. This is, and so for people who have access to health care, so leaving the access and the cost questions aside, what, if anything, actually is getting worse? Where should we be focusing in terms of health outcomes?
It's an interesting question. The truth of the matter is that almost everything, the thing about worse is that the biggest problem in healthcare in the United States is that we don't want to die. That's it. That's where everything comes from. And as we solve one problem, that problem still remains and everyone panics. The reason that we're all fixated on like what new diet there is or what it's because we all think that there's some magic that if we just figure this out, we're not going to die. And you're going to die. We're all going to die. It's hard, I know, but it's like, but that is, so everything is really better, except unless you're doing the things like if you still smoke, stop, If you are abusing drugs, stop. If you are an alcoholic, don't. It's like, it's like these are but those are like the low-hanging fruit. Be physically active, eat a reasonably healthy diet. This is where it is. And the truth of the matter is that we are getting pretty good at like taking care of disease as best we can. We have made significant advances in like solving life-threatening problems at the end. And as we do that better and better, we're not going to make people live forever. So
to phrase it as a targeted question,
yeah.
Am I being reasonable if I'm in a conversation and somebody raises some category of health and says it's gotten astronomically worse in the last 30 years, and I say, I don't believe the evidence is there?
What? I'd be like, what? Like, what? Tell me what it is, because
they'll say an example, but
Can you give me their example?
I'm afraid I don't.
Okay. But I was like, so I don't, because the things that they come up, usually the things that come up that people freak out about is they'll be like, oh my God, gluten. Everyone's gluten, no. Or they'll be like, autism is like, and it's like, no, because, we've done episodes. The research shows that, there is some uptick, but a lot of that is actually in what we call autism spectrum disorder now, and a lot of it is like awareness, that like we actually diagnose it when before we just sort of waste paper basket, like we just said, put it in a pile over there, we don't know what it is. Allergies were getting worse, but I believe we're just as much to blame for that as anything else. Is recent? Is the peanut episode out?
Oh yeah.
The peanut episode is good. Yeah, so it's like that. We, American Academy. I'm a pediatrician. We caused that. Like we, by keeping parents, moms from touching peanuts and from keeping kids touching peanuts, we made more kids allergic to peanuts. But that's our fault, and that wasn't. We can fix that today. So it's like let's do it. So. I just don't think there are huge classes in the United States of things that are like getting worse and worse and worse, with the exception perhaps of the opioid epidemic, which is but that again is our fault. That is not that someone else did that or that we need to fix it. That we did that, we need to fix that. But that's the big problem. Thank you.
which I guess is a species of a question and,
Okay.
and a question. The request would be for an episode of Healthcare Triage on ADHD.
Okay.
And the question I have is actually, what do you think is the most hurtful piece of misinformation out there about ADHD?
So this is when I would actually ask you, like, because people do this all the time, and it's hard for me when they say I'd like an episode on a syndrome, a disease, a problem, because we don't do a lot of like informational episodes of like, let's talk about ulcerative colitis. Because it's not like research based, and so when you say that, like, because I'm going to ask you, like, what specifically would you want me to talk about?
Well, I guess I'm thinking the most hurtful. There's so much misinformation,
right,
and so much characterization of ADHD. Maybe an episode on that. On
okay.
Like how it's perceived in media, how it's joked about in TV, and so on, and what the actual effects of it are,
Mm-hmm.
what the lived experience of it is, or something along those lines.
See, it's hard,
and how real it actually is.
And I'm going to have a continued dialogue with you because you're providing me with an opportunity. But part of it is like I don't have lived experience, and it's hard. Like this is where it's like Healthcare Triage is not an investigative journalist show. I don't go out and like talk to people. Like literally, it's me at a computer, whatever I can find in the medical literature, that's what's there. Like so, how do I talk about the lived experience when I don't know it? So I get what you're asking, and I'm not saying I won't do it, but it's like it's hard. Like if you said to me like I'm interested in like what the newest what the newest therapies are, or are we really over treating it, or those are questions I can answer.
Okay, so I think I might have something.
Okay.
Something that would point to sort of the biological foundations of it that we don't know a lot about.
No, we don't.
We know a little.
Right.
There are some things that we found,
right.
Some like genetic stuff and dopamine receptors and
right.
that kind of thing.
Although this is where I'm holding my eye roll back because I'm like, it's really.
Right.
We don't know
it's
it.
something maybe to legitimize it, for example. So, so that maybe the research could do something like that, which helps the misinformation about just stop being ADHD.
Okay. Well, that's ridiculous. That if somebody says stop being ADHD, I'm like, I know. Well, it gets back to what the previous question was, like somebody talks about being anxious and depressed, and they're like, well, just stop. Yeah, sure. Right. No. So, okay. Well, you give me something to think about. I will do my best. Thank you.
Okay, hi. This is sort of a broad, overarching question, but advice for being a healthcare advocate for elderly parents.
Oh, such a great question. I think so much of it is, as much as you can attend visits and ask questions and write stuff down, that is so important. I tell people all the time that when people are ill, it's such a mistake to go to the doctor by yourself because you do not remember the questions. Not because you're old and you can't remember, but no one can focus when they're asking questions that they're panicked about their health. I think making sure that you are helping and involved in their Medicare choices, I'm assuming Medicare if they're elderly, and making sure that they pick the right plans to cover what they need are super important. And I think that like advocating to make sure that they're getting their symptoms addressed, their concerns taken seriously, and that they're managing their care outside of when they had touched the medical system is super important. And that's probably what I can answer quickly. Those are good things.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I have a non-healthcare related question. I'm a father with kids growing up. As a doctor, what do you recommend for the order for watching Star Wars episodes?
So I'm gonna stick with it without breaking it. I'm still gonna stick with it because I think it was in the Machete that just makes the most sense to me. 4, always 4 first. Always 4 first. Then 5, because you can't spoil. Oh God, I'm sorry. This is not a spoil. You can't spoil the Darth Vader reveal. I mean, you can't. So it's like you got to go 4, 5. Then you go back to 2, 3, and that, ironically enough, heightens the tension of going back to 6. Because again, if you go 2, 3, you watch sort of the Anakin downfall and how he was, working with the Emperor and everything else. And so when you go to 6, it heightens the tension of Luke going through the exact same thing.
I'm assuming this is forgetting episode 1 exists.
Oh, yes, no. What episode 1? Well, there's no episode 1. There is no episode 1.
Last question is, who do you think is the last Jedi?
I don't know. The Last Jedi? Which thing are you referring to? That's
the title of the new movie.
That's the title of the new movie? Yeah. See, that's how out of it is. I'm going to assume Luke Skywalker. I assume that's what they're pointing us to. Then see, I don't know. I'm not going to yelling at me. I just heard this for the first time, and I thought he said The Last Jedi. It's Last Jedis?
Did you guys... Jedi.
Oh.
It's like.
So you guys have all thought about this. I'm on the spot, man.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know. I will think about it and I will answer that in the future.
I think the Ryan Johnson panel's in 206.
Yeah.
So, as a parent and a pediatrician,
Mhm.
do you have any sort of guide as to helping children learn how to read? Because I have a 4-year-old, and I was reading at that age.
Right. Okay, so the first thing I will say is your kids will be very, very different and they will not follow you. I am a huge reader, and it pains me to no end that my children do not share my passion. On the other hand, there's totally into things that I am not. And so I've tried with my oldest, like I have an enormous collection of science fiction and fantasy that he could not care less about. I'm a huge comic book collector. I must have 20,000 comic books in my house, and they won't touch them. If I lived in a house as a kid with 20,000 comic books, I would have lost my mind. I would have been in like, I can't, and their friends come over and see them and they look like, are you kidding me? And they could not care less. And then Noah, my middle son, he sometimes wants to read, and I will try with him. And then Sydney, my youngest, I got her into Anne of Green Gables for 2 minutes, and I was so happy about it, and then she bailed. So I just can't pull it off. But you know what? It's the kind of thing where it's like they're great, and they just don't do that. They can read, they do very well. They're just not into reading. I don't know. I wish I had that magic sauce. I would apply it myself. I don't know what to do. Having said that, it's like, I do making them at least do the minimum and learn to read and understand that reading is important. We absolutely, my wife and I encourage that. And
do you have a guide for that part of it?
So I think it's important, first of all, that you try very hard to expose them to stuff that's in their wheelhouse of what they care about. Making kids read the books that you think are important is a big mistake. Let them read the books that they think are important. Like if they wanted to read nothing but comic books, I would let them. And if they wanted to read nothing but historical fiction, which I'm not that into, then I would let them. So trying to find stuff that pleases them is good. And then modeling, just let them see you do it. But I also would say at 4, I wouldn't freak out yet. Son or daughter?
Daughter.
So it's like, I would not freak out yet. Like she's 4. There's time, plenty of time.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Really appreciate it.